Welcome, I'm Dr. Gordon Saxe, and today we're going to be talking about the 5 pillars of a healthy diet. We live in the midst of intersecting crises. The natural environment around us is being gradually eroded and destroyed. We're already seeing the likely effects of global warming, melting of the polar ice caps, rising ocean levels, increasing disruption of normal weather patterns, unprecedented heat waves, droughts, super fires, and killer tornadoes. Believe it or not, a large part of this has to do with what and how we eat. Our system of food production, processing, packaging, and distribution, a system that's steeped in the intensive use of non-renewable fossil fuels and synthetic chemicals. The modern system of food production is itself sickness-producing. The raising of cattle, mainly for hamburgers and steaks, leads to the release of more greenhouse gas in the form of methane from cows passing gas than from all cars, planes, trucks, and buses, the entire transportation sector combined. Modern agriculture is based on a system referred to as monoculture, the raising of massive fields of a single crop, particularly corn and soy, or vast factories full of animals, such as chickens and cows. But the crops produced by this system are inherently susceptible to devastation because they lack ecological diversity, and the animals are weak because of the awful conditions in which they're being raised and slaughtered. So both the crops and the animals are highly vulnerable to being decimated by a variety of pests and parasites, and this has led to the ever-increasing use of antibiotics, fungicides, and herbicides, chemicals that are leading to the emergence of antimicrobial resistant superbugs that are overrunning our hospitals and clinics. And we ingest these chemicals every time we eat these products. Chronic diseases are rampant. The prevalence of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, autoimmune disorders, and many other conditions are extremely high and likely to go even higher. Most people eventually contract one or more of them, and many live in a state of fear or dread. Part of this is due to the aging of the population, but much of it also has to do with our excessive and yet paradoxically impoverished diets, as well as with our sedentary and socially isolated lifestyles. Obesity has become the new normal. Not only are rates of adult obesity skyrocketing, but so are those in children. This feeds the development of almost every chronic disease and unnecessarily limits the quality of life and freedom of millions. And the cost of healthcare is spiraling out of sight. In spite of healthcare reform, millions are still left without healthcare or with inadequate access to care. Indirect costs such as the burden of caring for loved ones who are sick, absenteeism, and lost time at work are also substantial. Given the combined aging of the population, increases in rates of chronic disease, and the inadequately funded mandate of Medicare, the spiraling cost of healthcare threatens to bankrupt not only each one of us, but the entire economy. The system is unsustainable. And it's been estimated that if everyone consumed like Americans, we'd need 3 planet Earths and 4 Saudi Arabias just to provide the natural resources needed for each 20-year period. We can't continue this way. But the good news is that there is something that each one of us can do that can help to ensure our own health and that will also simultaneously help provide the solution to all of these social, environmental, and economic problems. The single most impactful decision that each of us can make is the choice of food we eat every day. Unfortunately, the majority of our population continues to consume the high meat and dairy, high sugar, high salt, low vegetable, highly refined, and highly chemicalized standard American diet, whose acronym SAD, SAD, I think says it all. I would argue that the standard American diet is one huge fad diet. This isn't the way our ancestors ate or the way that many of the healthiest people on earth eat today. Studies of individuals who've migrated from one area of the world to another underscore this point. When Japanese, Chinese, or others from countries with much lower rates of heart disease, cancer, and diabetes move to the United States, their risk of these conditions skyrockets, increasing from 500 to 1,000% in a single generation. Clearly, the killer chronic diseases in Western society are primarily caused by dietary and other environmental factors, not by genetics. So if the standard American diet is not the optimal way to eat, what is? 5 core principles stand out as the common denominator of a variety of diverse fields such as nutrition science and epidemiology, and ancient healing systems such as Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. They've withstood both the test of time and rigorous scientific investigation, and provide the underpinnings of an optimally healthy diet. We call these 5 core principles the 5 pillars. And note that good things come in 5. The 5 senses, sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. The 5 oceans. The 5 fingers on each hand and the 5 toes on each foot. And you can count them easily on the fingers of one hand. So what are the 5 pillars of a healthy diet? First, it should be plant-based. Second, it should be based on whole foods, not those that are refined or processed. Third, it should be balanced and diverse. Fourth, it should be local and seasonal. And fifth, it should be organic, biodynamic, and sustainable. If we were to reduce these 5 pillars to one word each, then our diets would be based on plants that are whole, diverse, local, and organic. The primary food groups of this approach are whole grains, vegetables, beans and legumes, and fruit, with the proportions weighted toward the staple foods, whole grains and vegetables. Secondary foods include seeds and nuts, fermented foods, mushrooms and herbs, spices and teas. And optional foods include minimally prepared condiments, cold-pressed oils, natural sweeteners, and small wild-caught cold-water ocean fish. Of course, it's important to keep in mind that there are other factors in health and healing. My friends often refer to me as the diet doctor and sometimes tease me for being single-mindedly focused on food. Of course, food is a central factor in healing, and in my view, it's the preeminent factor over which we have control. But they're right to remind me that it's not the only component of a healthy lifestyle or the only factor in healing. There are many others as well, and they bear mentioning. Physical activity, relaxation and stress reduction, sound, restful sleep, giving and receiving love and social support, a purpose in life, and a connection with something greater than oneself. It's also important to be mindful or fully conscious of why we choose certain foods to eat and how we select and prepare them, and when and under what conditions we eat them. Now, I'm not going to ask you to completely overhaul your diet today or all at once. Of course, if you're ready and motivated right now, don't let me stop you. But there are many of us who need a little more time to get prepared. So allow me to take a moment to provide a few basic tools with which to get started. Let's begin by talking about what I refer to as high sacrifice versus low sacrifice foods. High sacrifice foods are those things you can't imagine living without, even though you know they may not be all that good for you. By comparison, low sacrifice foods are those that you also know aren't that good for you, but you feel pretty confident that you could let go of them right now. Okay, now, you probably knew this was coming. I'm going to ask you to eliminate the low sacrifice foods right away. Think you can do that? But when it comes to the high sacrifice foods, we're going to treat them with kid gloves. Eventually, we're going to want to phase them out, but not today. Instead, I'll allow you to continue to enjoy them a little longer, but with 4 basic ground rules. First, eat them in smaller proportions than before. Second, consume them early in the day. Third, eat them mindfully. When we eat high-sacrifice foods, we'll want to eat them slowly, savor them, and reflect on what attracted us to them in the first place. We'll also want to take notice of how we feel after eating them. When we do this, we may begin to think of them as an old relationship that had its good points, but also had its bad points. For now, we'll enjoy them with no guilt until we're naturally feeling ready to say goodbye. Eventually, we'll discover new healthy foods to replace the tastes, flavors, and pleasure of our old high-sacrifice foods, and we'll be ready to apply the new mindful relationship we developed with the old foods to the new healthy ones. One last suggestion. Take notice of the crucial moments when you find yourself drawn to high-sacrifice foods and try and figure out what you can do to help yourself overcome the temptation. An example might be when you sit down in front of the TV and you feel like you need to be popping something into your mouth. Perhaps this is a time to take a moment to consider whether you're really that hungry or whether there might be a healthier substitute. But this is your life and your journey. I won't be looking over your shoulder. Think of it as your own personal science experiment to figure out which combination of things will work best for you to reach the you that you've always dreamt of becoming.